I want to know, I have to ask the question, is there any asterisks for winning such a unique major without any history? You know, we did just talk about this venue. Or is that just ridiculous nitpicking? And then also, how many spots does this victory jump him up the all-time list for you? Because obviously it was really the only feather in his cap that he needed to join the ranks of the elite as far as that extra accomplishment that a lot of people value. So what are your thoughts on this win, Hunter?
Well, first off, is there any asterisk? No. Mainly a few reasons. One, this, sometimes people might look at it, oh, this is in Europe, so they think weaker field. Statmando, this is actually the strongest field of the year so far, mainly because everyone's over there gearing up for Worlds. So you have all of the top players over there. Not to mention, even though it was a more birdie or die style course, which we're not used to seeing, it did produce a pretty chalky top 10. So the top, I believe it's the top 7 players are arguably 7 of the best players in the world, if I remember correctly. So Calvin also was going toe-to-toe with the guys you would expect him to go toe-to-toe with. So when you're looking at those two factors, then I think that already gets rid of the nitpicking. But if we also want to be nitpicking as, oh, there's not much history, well, when Worlds came to Lynchburg or when Worlds goes to other places, there's not history there either. It's just the title that comes along with it. So can we really say there's not history just because the title? That doesn't make sense to me either. So there should absolutely be no asterisk next to Calvin Heimberg's major or Silva Saarinen's major title here. Now, how many spots does this jump up? All determines or all bases on how much weight you actually give majors. Because if you just are looking at wins and you give majors some weight, then honestly, it probably doesn't jump him up that much because like the players ahead of him, in my opinion, looking at the Nate Dosses of the world, the Dave Feldbergs, Barry Schultz, are players who like he has close to the wins of all overall, not the Barry Schultz or Dave Feldberg, but like the Nate Dosses. But we're looking at Worlds and USDGC titles. So the only player in my mind that people might have had him ahead would be like the Nico Lacastros, the Nico of the world, maybe even the Will Schustrick, where it's like all they had on him were majors because he has the Elite Series title wins over them. So I think a major might bump him up there, but I think it more just solidifies his legacy, but doesn't really move him up the all-time list, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Those are definitely some names that he would be floating around with. Dustin, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not going to give it an asterisk either. I mean, for all the faults we gave this major for being an easy course, it is still a major at the end of the day. It still had the strongest field of players possible. They're all playing the same course under the same conditions, and you can only play the course and the players in front of you, and you can't blame Calvin for that. We didn't have any weird situations where like a round got canceled or someone had to play against really adverse weather and other people didn't. I mean, it was all pretty similar when it's all said and done. And yeah, there is a certain pressure that gets added to a major because it is just a major, and there is a pressure of I can't make any mistakes. I have to birdie every hole. I can't slip up, or someone's going to catch me. So there is going to be that where I still think it has value there. And also just for Calvin particularly, this guy's been such a consistent player for such a long time. He's been winning at least one tournament pretty much every year since 2019, except for the COVID year. And so now his first win of 2025 is a major. He was at many people's, eyes, the one guy who, hadn't won a major yet that should, you'll throw AB and some other names in that category too, but he was like kind of the main one considering how consistent he's been and how long he's been that consistent. Now, sure, it's not going to have the same prestige as other majors wins. Of course not. Like Worlds, just by name alone, always gets the most prestige. USDGC is always going to be super prestigious for people just because of this course and the history and the traditions that are around that. So yeah, it's not going to have the same value, I think, in a lot of people's minds because of that. It's almost like Champions Cup, where they kind of lost their identity too because it used to be the wooden major. Now we don't know what the heck it's going to be. So yeah, I'm not going to take anything off for Calvin. As far as my all-time list, it doesn't really move him that much because I personally already had him very high due to just how he's been like a top 10 player for like 6-7 years consistently. Yeah. Hardly ever finishes outside the top 10, and he has a lot of wins. So yeah, the major gives him a little bit of something that he didn't have for a while, but I think he kind of sits roughly around the same spot.
Yeah, with him, there's definitely a lot of eye test versus accolade stack up, no doubt about that. Hannah, where do you rank Calvin now? What do you think about this win? How does it qualify for you?
Yes, I agree with Dustin and Hunter. Like, there's no asterisk. I think that's getting really nitpicky. I think if you don't count this major, then you can't count Champions Cup or the Japan Open or any of the other unique majors we've had. So the reality is, at the end of the day, like Dustin said, it's a major, and the fans and the pros, they like the event, they like the venue, and Estonia gives it their all, even though it's an easy course. Now, this event does have a little bit of prestigious feeling because of the location, even though it doesn't have the history. But for the all-time list and how he moves up, I kind of looked into this a little bit, and there's a list that he just joined with 15 other names on it where they of all one major first single major winners. Pros like Kyle Klein, Nate Sexton, Big Jerm, Corey Ellis are all on that list. So I think of those 16 total people, he's probably at the top, just given how he's been performing recently. I think if we look at the names like across the all-time list and we're focusing on the majors, then I think he moves from somewhere in the 30s to up to like the top 20s, because there's only now 18 people who have more major wins than him, with those being people with 2 majors or more, all the way up to Ken Climo. So no, I don't think there's an asterisk with this win. I think it was a very legitimate major win and he deserves his title. I mean, that finishing putt alone was like, give him an award for that, because that was an awesome finish. But I think he does move up quite a bit in the leaderboard, especially amongst the ranks of those who are single major winners too.
Yeah. There's a lot of players in that category for sure. It takes a few more to maybe start jumping some of those other names, but so you're saying in your 20s right now is where you have them. Okay. Brady, do you agree? Is that where you place him as well?
No, I think I go a little bit higher, but I'll talk about that before I talk about the asterisk, whether it should be one or not. Because I think when you're, looking back at players, the first thing when you're doing these all-time lists, the first thing that jumps out at a lot of people is, were they able to win the big one, right? Were they actually able to win a championship? And when you are a great, but you never were able to win one, it always slides you down the further you go, because you're going to have more and more players after you come in, win championships. So you always feel like you're kind of getting pushed down the list. And I think that could have been Calvin's case here if he never would have won a major, of where he would have been one of the best to ever have played the sport that have never won a major, where now he's in that category. I think as of right now, I think he jumps all the guys that are on the 1 spot. I think he jumps everyone that's on the 2 spot just based on his performance that he's had over the last 5 years or so. I think it's tough to jump anyone outside of that. He's probably going to need to get a couple more majors or just a longer career of, a lot of Elite Series wins and all that. Now, as far as the asterisks go, it's really interesting because I haven't really actually dug into this before, but UDisc has a really interesting graph where they show all the major championships in what year. And Worlds is obviously the one that's has the most history. It started all the way back in 1982 with Duval winning that first one. Then it goes to the US Disc Golf Championship. That one goes all the way back to 1999. Then you have the European Open, which is interesting because like sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And that one seemed to be like the 3rd biggest one. And then you got Champions Cup that has happened the last 4 years and is starting to gain some more prestige. Now, what could happen with this tournament is it could end up being like a Japan Open. It could be something that is around a couple times and then all of a sudden disappears. But I'm looking at it too, like the Aussie Open. That's not a major that we talk about very often. Kona Piste, the only reason we bring that ever up is because Eagle won it. And it's kind of like, what the heck was that? But then there's like European Masters, Scandinavian Open, European Masters again, Copenhagen Open. These are all majors, guys. Stockholm
Players
Open,
Championship or something.
the Players Cup.
Yeah.
These are all the PDGA Championship.
Yeah, they were throwing it around for a while there.
So this is never going to like go away as a major. He's always going to be on the one major list. Yeah. The only asterisk would be like, if this goes away, people are going to kind of be like, wait, what was the major he won again?
It's totally because like we just talked about how like we now know right now in this day and age, it had an insanely strong field. But for all we now, in a lot of those past majors like the Japan, the Aussie Open, we know those fields were not super strong because players weren't even traveling as much. There was like usually 2 to 3 like good players at them. But, years from now, the Calvin fans will probably remember because he won this major, they'll be like, no, everybody was there, but it will be one that might, if it doesn't continue happening, you might glance at it and group it in with those other ones and be like, ooh, it was kind of one of those random majors. But I do think because Calvin won it and because at this moment, at least it seems so big for his career and he's such a big player in the sport, it's going to be harder to forget because it's kind of a huge, crux of his career.